You believe that war is a modern, uniquely human disease. You tell yourself that nature is peaceful, balanced, and innocent. You think that only humans organize armies to destroy neighbors. We believe that only humans can experience the toxic emotion of hatred. We tell ourselves that animals only kill when they need to eat. We assume that natural violence is always quick, clean, and completely necessary. This comforting view of nature makes us feel separate from other animals. It allows us to feel morally superior to the wild world. But the reality of the forest is far more complex and dark. The wild is not a peaceful garden of innocent, unfeeling creatures. It is a place of deep social bonds and deep social hatreds. But the deep forest holds a dark, unsettling secret. Right now, in the dense green jungles of our planet, our closest living relatives are acting out our darkest history. They do not fight just for food or immediate mates. They organize patrols, wage wars of attrition, and execute rivals. They build coalitions to systematically wipe out other social groups. They hunt their former friends down one by one in the dark. To meet the origins of human war, look at apes. Here, an evolutionary shadow has been growing for millions of years. This shadow shows that hatred was born before we existed. For decades, scientists believed that chimpanzees were peaceful, gentle vegetarians. We saw them as happy forest dwellers living in harmony. We believed that organized, lethal violence was a purely human invention. We told ourselves that culture corrupted our peaceful biological nature. But the chimpanzees of Gombe proved our assumptions wrong. The Gombe War represents a terrifying revelation of animal behavior. It was a systematic 4-year conflict between split forest factions. This war featured tactical ambushes, silent patrols, and brutal killings. Today, we look at the dark science of primate warfare. We examine the history of the Gombe Stream National Park. We show how these apes split and destroyed each other. Please stay with us until the very end of our journey. We will share an evolutionary realization about our own minds. Human tribalism is not a modern cultural creation of society. It is an ancient survival strategy we carried out of forest. To understand this war, we must look at a community. We must travel to the hills of western Tanzania. Here, in the 1960s, Jane Goodall began her work. She studied a peaceful group of chimpanzees called the Kasakela. This community lived in a rich valley of fruit trees. The valley was a perfect sanctuary for the growing chimpanzee community. The stream provided fresh, clean water throughout the dry season months. The trees were loaded with sweet wild figs and thick green leaves. The chimpanzees knew every path and tree in their home range. They traveled in stable, cooperative groups to forage for food daily. The young chimps learned which plants were safe to eat from mothers. They watched the adults groom and learned the rules of social life. This peaceful cooperation was the foundation of their successful survival strategy. They groomed each other, shared food, and raised their children. They shared sweet bananas and fresh figs in the high canopy. The young chimps played chase and wrestled in the dry leaves. Mothers watched their babies play and cleaned their thick black fur. Chimpanzees spend hours each day grooming the fur of their close friends. Grooming releases natural chemicals in the brain that reduce social stress. It is the social glue that holds the entire community together tightly. They groom to show trust, build alliances, and settle physical disputes. It was a close-knit group where everyone knew their social place. For years, the community seemed like a large, happy family. They played together in the branches and slept in nests nearby. Leaky was large, with a gray back and calm, intelligent eyes. He kept the peace among the younger, ambitious males very easily. The old alpha male, Leaky, was a respected, peaceful leader. He settled disputes quickly and maintained order among the young. But when Leaky died in 1969, Humphrey took control. Humphrey was aggressive, volatile, and lacked the respect of others. Humphrey's aggressive behavior created deep anxiety among the younger chimpanzees. He frequently charged through the group, screaming and shaking large branches. This behavior was designed to intimidate any potential political rivals. But Charlie was not easily intimidated by Humphrey's loud display charges. He stood his ground, backed by his loyal brother, Hugh, and allies. This constant tension made the daily social life very stressful for everyone. The females had to choose which group of males to follow daily. The division was not sudden, but a slow, painful social decay. He did not understand the value of quiet diplomacy and alliances. He relied on raw fear and display charges to assert his power. At the same time, the community grew too large for resources. Tensions rose as young males struggled for dominance and territory. The brothers Hugh and Charlie refused to accept Humphrey's control. They were popular leaders of the Southern Forest Chimpanzee group. Charlie was strong and brave, while Hugh was highly supportive. The social fabric of the community began to tear apart. Many of the southern chimpanzees refused to accept his harsh rule. They preferred the leadership of the young southern brothers, Hugh and Charlie. This political divide slowly grew into a physical separation of territory. They stopped grooming together and began to build nests in different areas. The northern chimpanzees occupied the Kasakela Valley and adjacent slopes. The southern chimpanzees settled in the Kahama region near the stream. This physical split created a silent, tense border zone between them. Both groups avoided this border area due to fear and suspicion. The two groups began to actively patrol their borders now. They avoided the Central Valley, where they used to meet before. Tensions rose as the chimpanzees could hear their neighbors' calls. They listened to the calls with deep anxiety and fear. The chimpanzees began to divide into two separate social factions. One faction remained in the north, keeping the Kasakela name. The other faction moved south, forming the Kahama community. This split was not a simple, peaceful moving of houses. It was a painful division of former friends and family. Chimpanzees that had groomed each other for years became strangers. They began to avoid the border zone between their territories. The forest became quiet, filled with rising fear and suspicion. And then, in January of 1974, war began. A group of 8 northern Kasakela males marched south. The northern males gathered in a quiet valley before the raid. They groomed each other silently, building social bonds for the fight. Then they began their march south into the Southern Territory. They walked in a silent, single-file line through the trees. They walked in single file, stepping in each other's footprints carefully. They did not make their usual loud feeding calls. They kept their mouths closed to avoid making any warning sounds. They stepped carefully, avoiding dry leaves that could make noise. They stopped frequently to listen for movement in the dry leaves. They scanned the high branches of trees for any southern sentries. They were looking for a solitary southern Kahama male. They found a young male named Godi feeding alone. He was eating fruit in the branches of a tree. The northern males surrounded the tree quietly, blocking escape. They formed a wide circle around the base of his tree. Humphrey climbed the trunk first to confront the lone southern male. Godi realized the danger and tried to run away. Godi screamed in terror and tried to leap to another tree, but Figan blocked his path, forcing him to fall to earth. But the northern males chased him down and pinned him. The northern males swarmed him immediately on the forest floor. They held his limbs tightly against the muddy forest floor. They pinned his arms and legs, preventing any chance of escape. A male named Hugo hit him with rocks and branches. Hugo grabbed a heavy branch and beat him on the head. They bit his throat and tore his skin with teeth. They bit his skin, tore his flesh, and broke his bones. This attack lasted for over 10 minutes of brutal violence. The attack was a brutal, coordinated execution of a former friend. They did not stop until Godi was silent and bleeding heavily. Finally, the northern males left him bleeding in the dirt. Godi died from his severe injuries a few hours later. This was the first time scientists witnessed chimpanzees killing chimps. It was not a quick fight over food or mates. It was a planned, coordinated execution of a former friend. The northern males celebrated their victory with loud, triumphant screams. Then they retreated north, screaming in triumph through the forest canopy. The northern males celebrated their victory with loud, triumphant screams. They shook branches, drummed on tree roots, and hugged. The boundary of peace had been broken forever in Gombe, but this was only the first blood of the war. The Kasakela males began to conduct regular border patrols. They marched to the southern border to look for targets. These patrols were highly coordinated, tactical military operations in nature. They climbed tall hills to scan the valley for movement. They listened for the distant calls of the Kahama group. They searched for broken twigs, footprints, and feeding remains. The patrol members moved in a silent, coordinated group through brush. They stopped to listen to the distant sounds of the forest. They sniffed the branches where southern chimpanzees had recently sat. This olfactory tracking allowed them to map the rival group's movements. They avoided the main trails where they could be easily spotted. They used the thick underbrush as cover for their strategic advance. Their movements were careful, deliberate, and highly organized in nature. This shows a level of military planning that shocked the researchers. This strategic scouting showed a clear understanding of territorial borders. The Northerners did not just walk, they actively searched boundaries. They looked for broken leaves, discarded fruit skins, or nests. If they saw a boundary mark, they inspected it carefully. They left their own scent marks to claim the area. They climbed to the top of tall trees to watch. They scanned the southern valley for any signs of movement. If they were outnumbered, they retreated silently back home. But if they found a single rival, they attacked. They targeted the southern males one by one over years. A southern male named D was the next to fall. He was cornered by the patrol while searching for ripe figs. D struggled to defend himself against the overwhelming number of attackers. They pinned his arms and bit his feet, hands, and face. The Northerners held him down and bit his inner thighs. They tore his ears and left him with deep head wounds. The violence was cold, systematic, and completely devoid of any mercy. D crawled into a hollow log and died from his infections. The older male Goliath was targeted next by his friends. Goliath's death was particularly tragic for the research team to watch. He had always been a gentle, friendly member of the community. He did not understand why his former friends were attacking him. Goliath had groomed the northern males when they were babies. He sat in the sun, grooming his legs when they arrived. He reached out his hands to greet them in social peace. Yet they showed him no mercy, breaking his old bones. Hugo and Satan dragged him across the sharp volcanic stones. They beat his chest and bit his neck until he stopped. Goliath survived the attack, but died in the forest alone later. Charlie was the next leader to be targeted by the patrols. Charlie's strength was his undoing as they targeted him with force. They knew they had to disable him quickly to avoid injury. They bit his fingers and toes, preventing him from climbing trees. He was a powerful opponent, so they used absolute caution. The Northerners ambushed him with 5 males at the river. Charlie fought bravely, but was quickly overwhelmed by the crowd. They bit his hands, feet, and face before leaving him. His body was found near the river by the research team. Sniff was the last remaining southern male in Gombe Forest. Sniff's long survival was a testament to his intelligence and speed. He knew he was being hunted and lived in constant terror. But the Northern Coalition was relentless in their pursuit of him. He lived in constant fear, hiding in the thickest bamboo. He was skinny, weak, and had no remaining allies left. The Northern Patrol finally tracked his scent in 1978. They cornered him near the southern border stream in the afternoon. Sherry and Everard held him, while the others beat him. They broke his limbs and bit his throat until he died. The systematic executions of the Kahama males was finally complete. The Northerners had wiped out their former friends and brothers. The war lasted for 4 long years of brutal attrition. They also captured and kidnapped 3 young Kahama females. They dragged them north, forcing them to join their community. If the females tried to run back, they were beaten. This is the ultimate dark reality of primate group expansion. Jane Goodall watched this violence with deep horror and grief. She struggled to accept the dark nature of her beloved apes. She wrote that she could not look at them again. She was haunted by nightmares of chimpanzee violence at night. The war shattered her idealized view of the natural world. She had to watch the animals she loved destroy each other. When she published her findings, the scientific community reacted. Many researchers refused to believe that wild chimps could war. They argued that Goodall's feeding stations had caused violence. They claimed that competition for bananas created the artificial conflict. They said that competition for human food created the violence. But later studies in other forests confirmed her terrible discoveries. Chimps in Gombe, Kibale, and Tai all engage in lethal raids. It is a natural part of their evolutionary biology. Chimpanzee warfare was not an artificial, human-created lab accident. It was a natural, adaptive strategy of the species. At Kibale Forest in Uganda, scientists witnessed similar lethal raids. They watched large coalitions expand their territories by killing neighbors. This territory expansion allowed the winners to claim more fruit trees. The larger forest area supported more food for their growing offspring. This brings us to the biology of lethal raiding theory. Dr. Richard Wrangham analyzed this behavior in his research. Wrangham's hypothesis explains why this cooperative violence is so successful. By reducing the number of rivals, they expand their own range. A larger range provides more food resources for the winning group. This high resource availability attracts more breeding females to the community, so the winning males pass their successful genes to more offspring. This cooperative violence is an evolutionary adaptation for group survival. It is not a random pathology, but a successful reproductive strategy. This evolutionary logic is the foundation of both ape and human war. He proposed the imbalance of power hypothesis to explain the war. In most animal conflicts, the risk of injury is very high. Even the winner can get hurt and die from deep infection. So animals usually avoid serious fights unless they have to. But when a coalition finds a single enemy, risk is zero. They can kill the rival without any danger of injury. By repeating these safe attacks, they weaken the neighbors. Eventually, they can claim the empty territory and resources. Chimpanzees live in communities with defined, defended territory boundaries. when one community has more males. They gain advantage. They can conduct low-risk raids into neighboring territory safely. By killing rival males, they reduce the enemy's strength. This allows them to claim more forest and food resources. It also allows them to attract more breeding female partners. The violence is a cold, calculated evolutionary calculation of risk. It is an adaptive behavior that maximizes genetic survival success. The victory in Gombe was complete by 1978. All Kahama males had been systematically hunted and killed. The Southern Territory was claimed by the victorious Kasakela group. But this victory brought new, unexpected dangers to them. Their expanded border now touched the territory of the Kalande. The Kalande were a much larger, more powerful group. Humphrey and his males were forced to retreat back north. The war had achieved nothing but death and empty forest. Now, let us bring these three loops together. Let us look at the grand realization of this history. When you look at the jungle, see the truth. The chimpanzee represents a mirror of our own dark nature. Its war was structured, featuring patrols, executions, and raids. Its violence was adaptive, driven by resources and territory goals. Its cruelty was real, breaking the bonds of former friendships. And this brings us to the ultimate, humbling human realization. We believe that our capacity for war is cultural. We think we invented organized violence in our modern cities. We blame weapons, politics, and greed for our wars. But the chimpanzee proves that war is older than humanity. We are not separate from the natural world and its laws. Our capacity for tribal violence is a shadow from our past. We carried this dark instinct out of the deep green forest. It is wired into our brains and our social structures. But we are not slaves to our ancient evolutionary history. We possess the unique cognitive ability to choose a different path. We can build global coalitions for peace and mutual cooperation. This conscious choice is the ultimate measure of our human intelligence. The future of our species depends on this choice every day. The roots of our conflicts lie deep in our biology. We carried these evolutionary shadows out of the ancient jungle. We are tribal creatures, wired to divide into factions. We protect our group and fear the outsider naturally. The next time you see news of human conflict, think. Remember the silent patrol marching through Gombe Forest years ago. Understand that we are fighting the same ancient battle today. But we possess something the chimpanzee does not have. We have the conscious power to rise above our biology. We can choose cooperation over tribal division and hatred. The spark of peace is also our evolutionary path forward. If this video changed your perspective, leave a like today. Please subscribe to our growing channel named Wild Sentience. It helps us grow and share these stories with you. Tomorrow morning, look out at the beautiful, wild world outside. Remember the primal conflicts and connections in the green trees. They are not empty, unfeeling biological machines in the grass. They are feeling, remembering, and dreaming of their own worlds, I read every single comment on our channel. Hearing your stories is the highlight of my day. It shows how you connect with wild neighbors around you. Tell us your stories in the comments section below today. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next.